I have the ambassador, Ambassador Aharoni. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hello and welcome. Hello.
Hello.
I'm Lisa Wexler. I have a hello from you from apparently your good friend Ellen Ratner, who was just on the show. She's on our show every week, in fact, and she wanted me to say hello to you, so I'm doing that.
Well, send her my warmest regards.
That's what she said.
Long-standing friend.
That's what she said. So, Ambassador, you wrote this piece in today's New Haven Register, and you talk about your sentiments regarding the Iran deal. Did you happen to see the remarks by Khomeini today on Twitter that were published by the Times of Israel with respect to the fact that he thinks, or he's saying, that Israel will not survive another 25 years? Did you happen to see that today?
Yes, of course. I had a chance to see this, and it only reemphasizes the point that I was trying to make in my piece, is that we needed a better deal that links the behavior of Iran, the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world, with the lifting of the sanctions. The fact that there is no such correlation is a source of great concern, not just for Israel, but for every person who's concerned with world safety.
And in your op-ed piece, you argue that you think that there should be a better deal. But as a realist, which diplomats have to be, do you realistically believe at this point anything about this deal is going to be changed?
Well, even if the deal will not be changed, if the text, the agreement will not be altered, it's important for the entire world, but in the first place, for the Iranians themselves, to know that the deal has opposition in the United States, has opposition in Israel, has opposition in Europe, all over the world. And the reason is because one of the things that is less talked about, less discussed, is the devastating impact this perceived diplomatic achievement of the Ayatollah regime will have on the opposition. Many people forget that the so-called Arab Spring, the wave of unrest throughout the region, started actually not in Tunisia, but rather in Iran in 2009, 2010, the so-called Green Revolution. And this opposition was quickly and swiftly suppressed by the regime, and violently and brutally suppressed by the regime. The presentation of this agreement as a major achievement of the current regime in Iran further undermines the positioning of the opposition and brings the likelihood of a regime change, makes it even more remote, unfortunately.
Wait, in other words, let me rephrase because I'm a little bit confused. I'm chatting with Ambassador Aharoni from Israel. So, Ambassador, are you saying that this accord, once signed by the Iranian current regime, it emboldens the opposition or it quells the opposition? Which does it do?
It undermines the opposition. It empowers the regime, clearly, because the regime then can present it as an achievement. And, we didn't need Khamenei's statements from yesterday. Only 3 days after the agreement was reached, the very same Khamenei said that death to America is a legitimate chant by the Iranian masses because it simply expresses the will of the people. He argued in favor of death to America chants.
Well, let me ask you something, Ambassador. Why do you think our President Obama, wants this deal?
Well, I think it's a combination of several things. All of them are very legitimate. The first thing is, of course, the concern of a military confrontation. No one wants another military confrontation. By the way, the Israelis, we are not interested in more military confrontation. I think that's one motivation. I think another motivation is the belief that you can rehabilitate this rogue sponsor of terrorism by providing them incentives and an all-encompassing embrace. And it's a very valid approach, I believe, in relationship in general and in therapy in particular. We also believe in the need to rehabilitate Iran, to bring them back into the family of nations. But since we know who we're dealing with, we believe that it has to be done through sanctions and discipline in the first place. And so we always believe that the sanctions were the main reason for the Iranians to come to the table of negotiation.
Yes.
And we believe that the combination of sanctions and the presence of a real credible military option on the table is the formula that will produce the desired result.
If President Obama had not opened this discussion again about reaching this treaty of sorts, would the sanctions have fallen away anyway? I mean, Switzerland was already on board to get rid of the sanctions as far as they're concerned. Was Europe agitating and Russia and China agitating to abandon the sanctions anyway?
Well, I think it's a theoretical discussion. We need to look at the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground is that the United States accounts for about 50% of global financial transactions. Iran accounts for less than 1%, maybe less than one half of 1%. So if you're a business, if you're a bank, if you're a company or corporation, you'll think once and twice and three times before you prefer the Iranian interest over the American interest. So the fact that the American public is against the agreement, the fact that there's a majority in Congress against the agreement, the fact that even those who support the agreement claim that the agreement has many problems, has many weaknesses, has many deficiencies, I think it's a major part of this consideration system.
No, I know, but that's not what I asked. What I asked was, in the absence of our doing anything, were some nations going to be abandoning these international sanctions anyway?
Well, that was my answer, that even if they did abandon, it still doesn't change the fact that if the United States sets the tone for the rest of the world because of the enormous size of your economy and the fact that
I see what you're saying.
For 50% of the global.
So in other words, they wouldn't want to they wouldn't want to risk pissing us off by doing business with Iran. That's basically what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, I know that's not a very elegant way of putting it, but that's the way I'm putting it. I'm chatting with Ambassador Ido Aharoni, who is the Consul General of Israel. And Ambassador, are you surprised by the amount of senators that have lined up behind President Obama on this issue?
Well, it's not for us to comment on the domestic political process here in the United States. Our job was to simply express our opinion, and we did it, I think, in a very vocal way. We did it because we believe this is what you have to do among friends. We see the relationship that we have with the United States is extremely intimate. And when you are in an intimate relationship with a family member or with a friend, it is incumbent upon you to express your opinion. It's your moral obligation, and we believe that it is also our historical role. And that's what we did.
And, over the last 7 years of President Obama's presidency, how do you view overall the relationship between the United States and Israel?
Well, I can tell you firsthand that despite of what the media perceives as a tension between the U.S. administration and the Israeli government, and we've had our share of disagreements in the past, I can tell you, and I've been in this business for 25 years, especially in the military and the security fields, the level, the depth, the scope of the relationship and the cooperation never been deeper, wider, and stronger.
So, well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I was ruminating before you got on the air, Ambassador. I this is from my point of view speaking now, that I don't understand what more it would take for a politician to hear from Iran itself that would persuade them that the Iranians have no good intent when it comes to the United States or to Israel. I don't understand why they believe that putting their pen to paper on this is going to be something that benefits us. I don't understand.
Well, I'm sure that the people who drafted this agreement, certainly the people who support the agreement, are not naive. I don't think they trust the Iranians per se. But I think there's a disagreement between us and them. I think that they believe that it is possible to isolate the nuclear issue from the rest of the issues, and we believe that the aspiration the Iranians have to become a nuclear military power is part of a much bigger picture. It cannot be isolated from the entire discussion about Iran's motivation. What is it that they're about? What is it that they stand for? And we believe they're talking about Islamic rule. They're talking about the exportation of the Islamic revolution all over the world, not only in the Middle East. They are the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world today. And the first victim is the Iranian people themselves. This regime is killing more Iranians than ever before. We're talking about thousands of Iranians killed by their own regime every year, gay people, people that oppose the government, women, and so on and so forth. And so there must be a correlation between lifting the sanction and changing the behavior of the regime, and we believe that this is within reach.
Okay, well, notwithstanding, the hope and the belief that it's within reach, it doesn't look, from a political point of view in America, as if this agreement is going to fail in terms of not getting congressional approval. It looks like it's going to squeeze by and get enough congressional approval so that President Obama can go forward, despite the fact that the House of Representatives won't like it very much, and despite the fact that many senators won't like it very much. It looks like it's going to go through. How does that alter internally Israel's policy, if at all, with respect to the world? What does this do? In other words, how does it change the way Israel does business?
Well, it won't change our position vis-a-vis the very attempt to engage in reconciliation with a regime that is openly calling for our destruction. It's important for our listeners to understand Israel's position, where we're coming from. There are 193 member states in the United Nations. There's only one country that is openly calling for the destruction of another country. Iran is habitually and repeatedly calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Mrs. Clinton today mentioned it in her statement, by the way. She spoke about it at length. And to us, it is unacceptable and inconceivable that the international community would negotiate with this country without bringing into consideration the fact that they're openly calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, without making any effort to link the agreement, the concessions, the lifting of the sanctions with their behavior, with their intent, with their motivation. I'll tell you more than that. Iran is the only country in the world that is openly denying the Holocaust, which is something that is, again, unacceptable to the state of Israel.
Totally.
And of course, add to that the fact that Iran today, you can find their fingerprints and footprints all over the world, from Latin America to North Africa, in Central Asia, in the Middle East, and certainly within Iran itself, is the foremost promoter of terrorism in the world. There's no other entity that is responsible for more terrorist attacks than Iran. You can see what they do. They destabilize regimes all over the place. Look at what they're doing in Iraq. Look at what they're doing in Syria. Look at what they're doing in Yemen, Bahrain. And I can provide you many other examples. While they were negotiating with the West, they were working against the interests of the West in at least 5 different arenas. And I can go on and on and on and give you examples. So it really won't change the fact that we see Iran as a great danger. We don't believe that you need to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. All you have to do is read what they're saying. Read
That's
their statements, listen to their speeches.
That's what I feel.
And they've been very, very honest and very, very open about it.
Are the people of Israel frightened about this agreement? Do they have apprehension that this is opening the door for a nuclear arms race in the Middle East?
We believe that this will have a devastating impact regionally on several levels. The first is, as I said before, it undermines the internal opposition to the regime within Iran itself. The second thing they will do, it will spark a regional conventional arms race, which already started.
Yeah.
The third thing it will do, it will spark a regional nuclear arms race, unquestionably will happen. And the fourth thing it will do, it will turn Iran into an untouchable nation. No one is going to mess with a country 10, 15 years from now that is going to be actually walked through the process to the position of becoming a threshold nation. And look at North Korea today. Think of what would have happened with Iraq if Iraq had nuclear military capability back in August of 1990 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Just use your imagination. Think of what would have happened if Saddam had nuclear weapons.
Well, wasn't that part of the issue? Didn't we think he had them stashed away someplace?
Well, you thought he had chemical weapons.
Yes,
issue,
yes,
but
that's true.
The nuclear capabilities of Iran were taken out in 1981 by the Israeli Air Force.
Right.
And Israel was severely criticized for doing so, even here in the United States.
I remember.
So 10 years later, when Saddam invaded Kuwait, August of 1990, imagine what would have happened if he had nuclear weapons. So the fact that you are on the verge of becoming a nuclear power, something that this agreement, as it stands, would grant the Iranians within 10 to 15 years, because all the sanctions will be lifted and they'll be free to do whatever they want. That will turn them into an untouchable player in the international arena.
So what about the argument, Ambassador? We're talking with Ambassador Aharoni, who's the Consul General of Israel. What about the argument that, you know what, they're just ignoring us anyway? This is what President Obama is selling us. They're just ignoring it anyway. They're doing it anyway. This is the way that we can keep an eye on them and make sure they don't do it. What do you think about that? That's what he's been telling us. He's been telling us that they've disregarded this anyway, and they're 10 or 15 minutes away from a bomb. But this agreement makes it 10 or 15 years.
Well, again, our Prime Minister said many times that we were presented with a view that no deal is better than a bad deal, and we believe that there could have been a much better deal that, for example, would have eliminated to zero the ability of the Iranians to enrich uranium, because, we know what we're dealing with. Look, if you believe that the Iranians are building an underground enrichment facility, and they've been lying to the IAEA about this facility for the last 15 years because they're interested in creating an energy source for their people for peaceful purposes, then go ahead. But we don't think they're telling us the truth. We think that they're lying. We think that when they say, and that's what the agreement is based on, their statement, their commitment, that they're not going to aspire to become a military nuclear power. We think that's a lie. Because if this has been the case, then why did you have to lie to the international community all those years? You know that when the inspection regime started, they had only 600 operational centrifuges. When the inspection regime, when the agreement is signed, they have 19,500 of them working,
and there it
out of
is.
which 3,000 of them are the advanced kind, which would give them the production capacity of 25,000 centrifuges.
All right,
so
Ambassador.
The Iranians have they've been hiding and concealing information all along. Why should we believe them now?
Okay, Ambassador. We'll have to come back and finish this conversation. It's 26 minutes after the hour. Ambassador Ido Aharoni, thank you very much for joining us on the Lisa Wexler Show today.
Thank you so much for having me.